Welcome back to For Mature Audiences Only, presented by Outreach Law Office, the podcast where we break down complex aging, caregiving, and elder care topics into clear, practical guidance that you can actually use.
We're your hosts, Mary Shapiro
and Shannon Johnson,
Senior Resource Specialists at Outreach Law Office. And each week we sit down with trusted professionals to help older adults and caregivers navigate real-life challenges with less stress and more confidence. If you're caring for an aging parent, supporting a loved one with a serious illness, or planning ahead for yourself, this is an essential conversation. This is For Mature Audiences Only, presented by Outreach Law Office. Let's get started.
Austin Bremner is a community outreach liaison with Bradley & Son Funeral Homes and SimpleCremationNJ.com, where he connects families and care professionals with trusted support before, during, and after a loss. With a background in funeral service, celebration work, and family support, Austin focuses on making end-of-life planning more approachable, offering clear guidance on cremation options, planning, and aftercare resources.
He's also the host of Compassionate Care Conversations, a podcast spotlighting local experts and resources to help families navigate caregiving, aging, grief, and difficult decisions with confidence and clarity. Welcome to the show, Austin.
Austin, thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have you on our podcast, excited to learn about all the things that you do in your role. So if you could, please explain your role and tell us what you do.
Sure. Excellent. Sure. Thanks for having me, Mary and Shannon. Excited to be on the podcast. And as you said before, my name is Austin Bremner, and I'm the Community Outreach Liaison for Bradley Funeral Homes and SimpleCremationNJ.com. Bradley Funeral Homes is a family-owned third-generation group of funeral homes, 5 of them, in Morris and Union counties. And SimpleCremationNJ.com is our statewide online cremation arrangement service. I also produce a podcast as well. It's called Compassionate Care Conversations, and the host is the owner of Bradley Funeral Home, Scott Bradley, and we meet with folks like yourself for both families and professionals.
It's a great resource. I've listened to some episodes.
Thank you.
So whenever people hear, funeral homes, cremation homes, they get a little bit scared, but there's a lot more. A little
bit icky.
Yeah, there's a lot more that goes into your guys' role than just, a simple funeral or anything like that. You guys do a lot of pre-planning as well. So can you explain what funeral pre-planning actually is?
Sure, absolutely. It's one of the main offerings. Families, you will choose some sort of final disposition, be it cremation or burial or green burial or natural organic reduction. As well as, like I said before, cremation and pre-planning, sort of the third service that families will reach out to us. But for sure, funeral pre-planning is simply putting your wishes in writing before your family is forced to make those decisions during a very emotional time. It can be as basic or detailed as someone wants. And at the simplest level, it answers questions like, do I prefer, like I said before, burial, cremation? Who should be contacted? Who's in charge? Are there any religious or cultural traditions that matter to me? Are there any special instructions my family should know? And again, it's not about being morbid. It's about giving your family clarity.
Absolutely. We kind of find the same thing kind of in our realm with pre-planning and estate planning. People are always nervous to have those conversations, but we both feel like they're necessary ones to have.
They go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And again, better to have those conversations when you're not in crisis and nothing has happened yet. And you're able to talk about your wishes with your family and the funeral director or the funeral home, whatever you choose, not under duress.
Well
I
said,
think that's
Mary.
so important.
So what are some of the main benefits of planning ahead versus waiting until obviously a crisis or something like that happens?
Excellent. The biggest benefit is reducing stress. You can also save money by planning in advance. You can avoid emotional overspending or underspending in some cases. But when someone dies and nothing's been discussed, families are grieving and trying to make decisions quickly. They may be wondering what mom would have wanted, what dad would have chosen, who's supposed to pay, or who's even allowed to make decisions. Planning ahead turns a very overwhelming moment into something more manageable. It also helps prevent conflict because the family is not guessing. They're simply following your wishes. So there's a lot of clarity in that, as we said before.
What is the point in someone's life where they should start the pre-planning stage?
Excellent. Another good one. Honestly, earlier than most people think. It doesn't mean you need to walk into a funeral home at age 45. That means I'm a little late. And plan every detail. But if you're doing a will, power of attorney, healthcare directive, Medicaid planning, long-term care planning, or moving into a senior living community or facility, funeral wishes should be at least part of that conversation. A good rule of thumb is if you're already organizing your affairs to make life easier for your family, funeral planning belongs in that same folder. So you might as well.
That's so true.
Yeah, it is a good point, because I remember when I did sales in an assisted living community, part of the demographics forms that we gave to the families to give back to us was, God forbid your loved one passes, who should we reach out to? Is there a funeral home that you guys already have arrangements with? And a lot of times people didn't. And they would often say, we're not ready to talk about those kind of things yet.
It's heavy conversation. It can be, but we're going to dive more into that.
Yeah, absolutely. What decisions can be made in advance, and what tends to be like left open for families?
Excellent. Well, the good thing is you don't have to do it all at once, as you were talking about, and people can make big decisions in advance. Things like burial or cremation, traditional service or something simpler, religious or non-religious elements preferred at a funeral home, or cemetery information, obituary details, veteran information, what musics or readings, and who should be involved. What often stays open are the personal touches that families may want to add it later, like photos and stories, the reception, speakers, and exact timing. And those generally get filled in, after someone passes. And pre-planning does not have to take the family out of it. It gives them a framework so that they're not starting from zero.
I think most families would feel, like you said, starting from zero, like, where do I even begin? Who do I call? If there have been no conversations or someone hasn't pre-planned and let people know what they want. That's why we're having this conversation today.
Absolutely. Speaking of the pre-planning stage and stuff, as far as the payment goes, how does pre-paying for a funeral work? And is it something that you all generally recommend?
Absolutely. Prepaying is a separate step from pre-planning. Pre-planning is putting your wishes in writing. Prepaying is funding those wishes ahead of time. Then, depending upon your situation, that may involve a funeral trust, an insurance-funded plan, or another approved funding option. Whether it is the right choice depends on the person's age, health, finances, Medicaid planning concerns, and family situation. I would never give blanket financial advice, not being a financial planner.
Sure.
But I do think it's worth discussing with both the funeral home and elder law professionals like yourselves, and as well as a financial professional involved. And for some families, it can be a huge relief. For others, simply documenting the wishes is the first right step. Everyone has their own path.
I think that's important to point out. Like you said, it's two separate things. Pre-planning and pre-paying, two very different steps. You can do one, not the other, or you can do both.
Bingo.
Have you seen situations where pre-planning made a major difference for a family in their process?
Yes, absolutely. The families who usually have some kind of plan in place are just able to breathe a little bit more, and that's really important. They still grieve, of course, but they're not carrying the extra burden of guessing, which is difficult. Even something simple like knowing cremation was preferred, knowing who should be the decision maker, or knowing what parent wanted the modest service instead of something elaborate can make a huge difference. It gives the family permission to act with confidence.
I think, again, we can relate to that in the aspect of a lot of our families come to us in crisis mode, and their things kind of aren't in order, and we kind of have to help them get them in order. So there's a lot of chaos that can be happening in that time frame, from them coming in, realizing there's an issue, to then us finally getting them to be where they're even keel. So pre-planning, we always recommend to everyone to pre-plan as much as possible and update things as things change in your own life.
And have those conversations. I mean, it's one thing to write things out on a plan, but then make sure you're talking to your loved ones about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or your local elder law attorney.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your
Kinda
professional.
Kind of where it starts. I think it's interesting that I think most of our clients, our elder law and funeral homes, they come to us in crisis. And I think we wish more of them. As one big takeaway from this, I know we're not even near the end, but I guess one big takeaway is I wish they came to see us sooner.
Absolutely.
Yes,
We
that
always
seems
say
to be
that.
the theme.
Yeah, you should have came to us 6 months ago or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So speaking of how we can all work together, how does funeral planning tie into like broader estate planning?
As we were just talking about, to me, funeral planning is one of the missing pieces in a lot of estate planning conversations. And people will talk about wills, powers of attorney, trusts, Medicaid, assets, and healthcare decisions. But then funeral wishes get left out. And it's understandable. It's not the easiest one to talk about. The problem is that the funeral happens immediately after death, often before the estate is settled.
Right.
And so families need guidance right away. When funeral wishes are a part of the broader plan, everything's more organized and just less stressful, as we know.
Sure. And what happens if someone hasn't communicated their wishes clearly in their estate plan?
That's where we all come in. That's where we earn our, that's where we earn it, so to speak. I always tell people to speak with an elder law attorney for the legal side. But for the funeral planning side, the helpful pieces are a will, power of attorney, healthcare directive, funeral agent designation if appropriate, cemetery deed or plot information, veteran discharge papers if someone served, insurance information, pre-arrangement documents if they exist, and a simple written list of wishes. Also tell your family where those documents are. A perfectly organized plan doesn't help if we can't find it.
Absolutely.
That is true. And is there a specific document families can use to pre-plan?
Excellent. I don't know that there's a document. There's tons of checklists that we have and other providers will offer. But really, it starts with a conversation, taking notes, some of the big decisions, kind of like we talked about. And then once you meet with your funeral home and funeral director, you can go over and narrow down the choices as you go.
Great.
Are funeral expenses typically covered like through an estate, insurance, or some sort of separate planning?
It varies. Some families use funds from the estate. Some use life insurance. Some have a prepaid funeral plan. And some may pay directly at the time of need. The important thing is to understand that funeral expenses often come up immediately before an estate is fully settled. As we know, that takes time. And that is why families should talk ahead of time about how things would be handled. And if Medicaid planning isn't involved or if the family is concerned about affordability, that conversation is even more important.
Have you seen changes in what families want from funeral services over time?
Yes, families still want dignity and support, so that never changes. But they're often looking for more flexibility. Some still want a traditional service. Some want it all to happen one day, which has been a growing trend. Some just want a simple cremation. Some want a celebration of life, a smaller gathering, a religious service, maybe just a graveside service, or something very personal or informal. And I think the biggest change is that families want the service to feel like the person, not just a template.
That's a great point.
That is a great way to put it.
As someone who's attended, sadly, funerals over the past several years, I've seen that trend in the ones I've attended where a lot is happening in one day, celebration of life, small religious services, like all the things that you've said seems to be what I've witnessed personally attending.
Speaking of the trends, I have something that I just thought about. Are people planning? Is there ever a point in time, let's say, like the generation prior to us, like the people that came up in like the older generation? I'm talking about. Was there ever like a more pre-planning than there is now? Because I feel like it's not as much pre-planning happening now as maybe there was with the older generation.
Very good question. I'm going to think about that for just a minute.
And let's define older generation, Shannon.
I'm trying to think of like. I'm trying to figure out the right way to phrase my question. I feel like back in the days, right, people had those long-term care policies from like the 80s. Like that group, I feel like pre-planned a lot more than, let's say, the generation now pre-plans. That's kind of where I'm getting at with that.
Sure. I feel like the way technology is, going through a pandemic the way we all did, and we're all forced to think about our own mortality, and that kind of brings on the topic of pre-planning. So while I don't have any data right in front of me, anecdotally, I would say that pre-planning has been on the rise, and people are starting earlier. There's just so much more awareness and education, whether it be you heard it on a podcast or, you went through the experience yourself and you were unprepared.
Right.
And that's something I do want to note. Families who had even gone through a loss and didn't pre-plan are more likely to want to pre-plan the next time around.
Gotcha.
They'll attend a lot of our pre-planning events for funerals and cremation. And so that's something we definitely see. So I think that's the best way I could answer.
Yeah, it's a
No,
good
that
answer.
was
Yeah, it's a
good.
good answer. So kind of when someone kind of goes through the crisis now, they realize, oh, instead of me having or my family having to deal with this when my time comes, let me get ahead of this and pre-plan for it now.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mary.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, especially if you've been on the other end of it being nothing planned. Like we were in a position in my family where a relative had passed away who had never married, no children, and all of the surviving cousins had to step in, and we were all discussing what would be good. Everybody was remembering different pieces of conversation, and it was challenging to make sure we honored her the way we all thought she would want to be honored.
Yes, getting a consensus after someone passes is not easy.
No.
And hopefully the funeral home, your family, or whomever was working with will slow you down.
Yes.
That's really important. That's one way we can help families compensate if they didn't plan in advance.
They were a great resource, honestly.
Excellent. Glad you were well taken care of.
Yes.
How has the rise in cremation changed the work funeral homes do?
Cremation has definitely stayed steadily on the rise. A couple of years ago was the first time statistically in our nation that there were more cremations than burials.
Wow.
Yeah, so I guess it got the 51% mark not long ago. So that's sort of an overarching trend throughout the country. But more specifically, to answer your question, cremation has changed the conversation because sometimes people think cremation means nothing happens. But cremation is just a form of disposition and not the whole memorial experience or funeral itself. Families can still have a visitation, a funeral, a memorial service, a religious component, a celebrant-led service, a burial of cremated remains, maybe a scattering, keepsakes may be involved and distributed amongst the family, or just a very private goodbye. So part of our role is education, helping families understand that cremation can be simple, but it can still also be meaningful.
I do think, I don't want to call it stigma, but I think education around cremation has been more and more prevalent over these past several years. I know in the past, when I was younger, I thought cremation meant you had nothing until
me
you
too.
become educated, until you realize that that's like what you just described it as.
Two things from a consumer or just someone in the business. It gives families, if they choose cremation, it gives them flexibility. Families are spread out more. We have busy lives, and so it allows for time to coordinate those services and kind of like I don't want to use the word, a celebration of life, maybe like a wedding or another type of event where it gives families time to travel. And then practically speaking, you don't have a body lying in wait. It's possible, but you don't have that factor. And it just makes, and also there's cost control. In addition to the flexibility, cremations are generally less expensive.
Out of curiosity, when COVID was happening and the COVID was big, did you see like a rise in cremations during that time?
Huge spike. Yeah, huge spike. And the other trend that sort of pushed in that direction, which was already starting just before that, where they're all in one-day services, where we'll have whether it be a wake, chance for families and friends to see and say goodbye before the service, and then off to the place of final disposition, whether it was a wake or a memorial service with cremated remains.
Are more people these days opting for non-traditional or personalized services, and what does that look like in your practice?
Yeah. That's where we put the fun in funeral. Yes, personalization can be big or small. It can include their favorite music, hobbies, photos, a memory table, even a theme display, a special reading, a food item connected to a person, a celebrant telling their life story, or a gathering in a place that feels right to the family. And we always remind families that meaningful doesn't have to mean expensive or elaborate. Sometimes the most meaningful detail is one small thing that makes everyone say that was so them. And if I can share a short personal story.
Sure.
In
Please.
2009, my brother had passed away rather abruptly. And so for his services, We decorated the whole funeral home. We had all his fishing, racing memorabilia. He was into Smokey and the Bandit black Trans Ams and had several throughout his life. And we got a cheap metal black casket with chrome handles, and we got some custom decals made so it just looked like Smokey and the Bandit's Trans Am. So
That's
Wow.
it was pretty cool way to say goodbye to my brother
Yeah,
Colin.
it's a nice homegoing service for him, for sure. Technology, you touched on it a little bit earlier. Has technology like live streaming and online memorials changed how you guys operate?
Yes, it definitely has, particularly during COVID. We went from no live streaming services in any of our funeral homes to literally overnight outfitting all 5 of our funeral homes. So we're equipped to do that on demand. And more recently, while the trend has waned somewhat, it is still a regular part of what families look for. So as I said before, families can be very spread out. So it's an easy way for those who cannot attend for whatever the reason is for them to still participate and be visible.
Yeah, my mom had used that service when her brother passed out in Kansas City. She's in New Jersey, was unable to travel. So she and her sisters gathered at the house and watched the online memorial. So she was happy she was still able to participate in a way, even though they couldn't get out there in time.
Yeah, and it really, technology has a way of, I know it can isolate some of us by not being in the same room, but in those instances, it actually expand the circle of support for a family, and that's always a good thing.
Right, and I'm sure, with some religions, the person has to be buried within 24 or 48 hours, so I'm sure that online aspect also helps for the families that can't necessarily get there in as quick of that time.
Yes.
How does understanding the work you do help people make better pre-planning decisions?
Another good one. When people understand what happens after a death, they usually realize why planning matters. There are emotional decisions, legal decisions, logistical decisions, financial decisions, and family dynamics all happening at once. Pre-planning is not about controlling every single detail. It's about removing as many question marks as possible so your family can focus more on grieving and less on figuring everything out.
Are there things people assume are included in funeral arrangements or services that actually aren't, or vice versa?
Yes. There are tons of assumptions on both ends
I
that
was
we
going
often
to say,
hear.
I'm sure.
So let me try to clarify a little bit and
Yes.
answer that question for you, Mary. Yes, that is why transparency is so important. People may not realize that cemetery costs, clergy or celebrant honorariums, newspaper obituary fees, flowers, death certificates, permits, or cash advance items can be separate from the funeral home charges. And on the other hand, some people are surprised by how much coordination the funeral home does behind the scenes. And my advice is always ask for a clear explanation and a written estimate. A reputable funeral home should be willing to walk you through it in plain English. And there's something called the Statement of Funeral Goods and Service. It's an itemized list of all charges broken into 5 categories. And that is something you would get upon sitting with a funeral director and making your selection so that you'd have an official sort of written estimate of what your funeral could look like as far as costs.
How can people better prepare their families for the realities of what happens after death?
It's the answer is easy, but it's not easy.
Sure, I can imagine.
And I guess I would say start by having one honest conversation. You don't have to cover everything at once. Tell your family what you prefer, who you trust to make decisions, where your paperwork is, and whether cost or simplicity matters to you. Also write it down. And families don't need perfection, they just need direction.
that's a great quote. I love that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that is a great quote.
Families don't need perfection, they need direction.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And just a quick story, when my grandfather, right before he passed, he made it very clear that he wanted it to be as simple as possible. He's like, I only want this to be like half an hour, 45 minutes max. And I only want you guys, when it comes to your speaking part, a minute max. I want you guys to get it in and get it out. He didn't want anything over the top. And when you provide that clarity to your family, I think it makes the whole thing easier because we knew what Grandpa wanted. He didn't want anything big and over the top like some other people in your family might want.
Yes. That's where the discussions, and that's why pre-planning is so important.
Right.
Right.
Starting with what in your grandfather's case wanted.
When you combine the emotional, logistical, and planning sides of what you do, what do you wish people appreciated more about what funeral homes actually do?
I guess I'd say I wish people understood that a good funeral home is not just a place you call after someone dies. It can be a resource before, during, and after a loss. And there's the service itself, but there's also education, coordination, paperwork, care for the family, support after the funeral, and connections to other resources. At best, funeral service is part of the continuum of care.
And what does a community outreach liaison at a funeral home actually do? So what do you actually do, Austin?
I love the question. Thank you. I will say I've been doing in this particular role. I've been with Bradley Funeral Homes for a very long time, but I've only been in this role for the last 10 years, and we felt like we can interact with the communities that we serve, not just the families, but also community partners like a great elder law attorney like Archer Law, for example. And while I have seen a few other funeral professions in my travels in the last 10 years, I could probably count them on one hand.
Right.
So we're very fortunate and set up the way that we are, and that's a credit to Mr. Bradley's vision and positioning us as a part of the continuum of care. But to really answer your question, my role is to build relationships before families are in crisis. I meet with hospice teams, social workers, elder law attorneys, senior living communities, care managers, community organizations, and families. A big part of my work is education, helping people understand options, resources available, and planning steps before they get overwhelmed. I also try to make the funeral home feel less intimidating and more approachable. We want to be part of the community, not just a place people call on their worst day.
That's a great way to put it. What kind of education are you doing in these facilities and stuff?
Sure. So education-wise, we not only work with families, pre-planning events, whether virtual or in person. On the community partner side, or professionals like elder law attorneys will do, or hospice organizations will do in-services to talk about how to help their families prepare for what's next.
Great.
So
Sure.
there's two sides to the education that we offer.
That's such an important link, too, if you're getting in front of hospice social workers and helping them so they can help their patients and families.
Yeah, Mary and I do the same thing. It's all about just providing that resource for families, let them know that, there doesn't have to be a massive crisis. There are things out there and resources to help families get through these tough times.
Yes, absolutely. I was mentioning that to Mary early on, how I love your title as Senior Resource Specialist. It really speaks to that educational component of what we do, because it will never stop. It's an endless amount.
Right.
Right.
That's truly what we are. I'm sure you can relate. People call us from different avenues in senior living all the time about what to do, who to call, how do I approach this, how do I go about it. So it helps to be able to know kind of what everybody does, so that when someone needs that help, we can just be able to plug that person with who they need to be plugged
Right.
with.
Point them in the right direction.
Right. What do adult children often misunderstand about funeral or cremation planning?
Oh, I was going to jump on that question. Yeah.
Excellent one. This can be an interesting one at times, because you're dealing, with two generations while you're trying to plan for someone's funeral. And so I guess I would say a lot of children assume there will be time to figure it out later. But after a death, decisions come quickly. Another misunderstanding is that cremation, as we talked about before, means no service or no goodbye, but that's not always the case. And families do have options. The most important thing is not whether the choice is traditional or simple. The important thing is whether the choice fits the person, the family, and their circumstances.
Now, people listening may think this is heavy topic, but what is one simple first step for someone who may feel overwhelmed by this topic?
Write 3 things down: what you prefer, who should be in charge, and where the important documents are. That's a very manageable starting point, and you can always add the details later.
Absolutely.
That's great.
How does simplecrematioNJ.com fit into the options families may need?
Excellent. SimpleCremationNJ.com is our statewide online cremation arrangement service. It was created for families who want a simple, dignified, lower-cost cremation option without having to come into a funeral home for every step. For some families, especially hospice families or families who already know they want direct cremation, that convenience and transparency can be a real relief for them.
What should families know about lower cost cremation options without sacrificing dignity?
Yeah, that's another important one. Those That's a common assumption that can be made there. And so,
Right.
so
Kind of ties into what we talked about earlier,
yes,
the
yes.
misconceptions.
That's right. Simply said, lower costs should not mean lower care. Families should ask what is included, who's providing the service, where their loved one is being cared for, how communication works, and what additional charges may apply. The simple cremation could be handled with dignity, professionalism, and compassion, and should be.
What is a funeral agent and why might that matter?
So glad you asked. We wish more people knew about funeral agents. It's a very powerful tool.
Because I've also never heard of one myself.
Yeah. So I'm glad to appreciate you asking. It's a very powerful legal tool, but it's also a very simple legal document. It can come in handy in a lot of different ways. We've seen families who are kind of spread out or don't really have anyone. They'll designate a friend nearby to make their funeral decisions for them. And other times there may be family conflict, and the person may reach outside their family and designate someone to be their funeral agent, their person who would sign the cremation authorizations, things of that nature. As far as the legal side, I would always defer to an elder law attorney for the legal details. But broadly speaking, a funeral agent designation can help identify who has authority to make funeral decisions. And that can be very important when families are blended, estranged, unmarried, or likely to disagree. And the goal is clarity. And when the right person is legally empowered and the wishes are documented, the family has a much smoother path.
I'm sure. And what resources do families often need after the funeral is over? I don't think people realize that there's resources after the funeral.
Yes, we have a whole aftercare program. We stay with families for more than a year after services.
Wow.
We have a whole section of our website dedicated to post-funeral support, where you can find the funeral agent form amongst many other support resources. But after the funeral, the support needs not to disappear. Families may need grief support, help understanding next steps, estate-related guidance, perhaps a recommendation for a local elder law attorney, caregiver support, or simply reassurance that what they're feeling is normal. That is why aftercare and post-funeral resources matter. The funeral may be one day, but grief and adjustment continue. And as I mentioned before, that's why we have post-funeral support resources, bereavement support, and community resources available for our families on demand.
Yeah, I don't think grief ever stops for any of us. Yeah, you just learn how to cope with it in different ways. Because my grandfather passed in 2012. I still deal with that on a daily basis. You know what I mean? So it definitely never gets any easier. You know, just learn how to cope with it in different ways.
And it's good to know there's those support mechanisms out there: grief support, bereavement support.
We're not going it alone, but it's hard to reach out for help when
Sure.
it's something
Absolutely.
that is so close to the heart. But families who do, and as you know, anyone who's experienced loss, when you do reach out for help, can really be a tremendous relief and very healing.
And Mary and I try and push our clients to support groups, no matter where they are on the, in their journey.
Correct.
Whether it be for dementia-related services or after a loved one passes. Those support groups, I think, really, really can help out a lot, because it does help you feel like you're not alone in whatever you're going through. How can professionals make better referrals to yourself?
Excellent. I think we may all have a similar answer, but I'll go ahead and give mine. The best referrals are warm and practical. Instead of saying, call a funeral home, a professional could say, here is someone who can answer your questions before you're in a crisis. It also helps to know the family's priorities, simplicity, costs, religious traditions, veterans benefits, any Medicaid concerns, if they want cremation or burial, or they want to start with pre-planning. The more context we have, the more helpful we can all be.
And what would you say to someone who is afraid that talking about all of this funeral planning that may upset their family?
Oh, it's almost impossible.
I know.
Mary, we hear that a lot.
I'm sure.
We
sure, yeah.
hear it a lot. That's one of the, for better or for worse, it just is what it is, and that it keeps families from even having those simple first conversations.
Right.
But like I said, we hear that a lot, and we do understand that fear. Talking about your own mortality and planning for the end is not easy, no matter what state you're in or what part of the journey you're in. But we try to reframe it. The conversation may feel uncomfortable for 10, 15 minutes, but not having the conversation could leave your family uncomfortable, confused, and stressed for days or weeks or maybe longer. It's really an act of love. Some call it the greatest gift, and you're not giving them a burden. You're actually taking one away.
Absolutely.
100%. I know with my own family, we had a discussion over a barbecue, and we had my father, my parents talk about what they may or may not want in a more lighthearted atmosphere. Nobody was in crisis. But then fast forward several years, and we were in crisis with my dad. We were able to refer to that conversation and say, remember Dad said this, right. Dad wanted this. And by then he had sat down and pre-planned everything. So a barbecue conversation that may be a little uncomfortable can lead to clarity down the road.
Yeah. The big payoff when, families who take care of the pre-planning, it's not something we talked about this when I first got here, Mary, and that, it's not a gift that you're a feeling you'll get until you've done the work.
Right.
And it's a great story, and thank you for sharing.
Sure.
What's the connection between funeral planning and Medicaid planning?
When Medicaid planning is a part of the picture, funeral planning can become easily important, especially important because families are trying to understand what is allowed, what is protected, how to plan responsibly. Those are all things you hear from Medicaid spend downs, I'm sure.
Right, absolutely.
And I would always tell families to work with an elder law attorney to that point on the Medicaid rules. And from our side, we can help them understand funeral and cremation options, costs associated, and what questions to ask.
What do you hope listeners do after hearing this episode, ideally?
I think we all know the answer to that question.
Yeah. But go ahead and say it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. I hope they do one practical thing and start the conversation, write down wishes, ask an elder law attorney about decision-making documents, gather your important paperwork, or call a funeral home just to understand options. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to begin.
Again, I love that quote.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be perfect, just has to begin. And we always end our guests with asking, what's their why? Why did you do it? Why do you do what you do?
Excellent. Appreciate the question. Where do I begin? Why? But I'll get right to it. It makes me think a lot. I literally grew up at Bradley Funeral Homes. I've been with the organization since 1995, minus about 5 years. So I've literally grown up there.
Wow.
And so little did I know, as I worked for Bradley Funeral Homes, I had experienced a lot of personal losses, not just my brother, friends my age. And so it's kind of an unusual amount. And I learned that all the things that we were teaching our families to do, warm the room, plan ahead, things like that became so much more important. So I had to start walking the talk, so to speak, and walking the walk. And that was a tremendous help to my family. And having lived through that and gone through those experiences, it makes it a lot easier to, whether I'm talking to professionals in this setting or families and urging them to plan ahead for their own sake. It's kind of easy to do and very rewarding to do.
Absolutely. Austin, thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing your education, because I think the listeners can really benefit even by doing just one thing after hearing all of this information.
Thank you, Mary and Shannon. It has been an honor to be on the podcast. It really has. I hope families get some good information from it and really appreciated the opportunity to sit with you. So thank you.
And your podcast, I just want to circle real quick, Compassionate Care Conversations. People can get more information by listening to that, correct?
Yes.
It's on YouTube.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. It's Compassionate Care Conversations. It's on YouTube. It's on our website, hosted by Scott Bradley, who is my boss, but a third-generation funeral director, social worker, psychoanalyst. And he sits down with folks from the community, elder law attorneys, hospice folks, social workers, grief experts, funeral service professionals to get good information for families and professionals and really shine some light on those people who've done a great job. But you can find it on YouTube and find it on our website. And I get the joy of producing that podcast. So
great. There's a lot of great information on it. So
thanks, Mary.
Austin, thank you so much.
Thanks, Shannon.
We appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.
Likewise.
Thanks, Austin.
If you found this episode helpful, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone that it could benefit.
Just remember, you don't have to navigate aging or caregiving alone.
If today's conversation raised questions about elder law, long-term care, or planning ahead, please visit jerseyelderlaw.com or call 609-842-9200 to find resources and support.
This is for mature audiences only, presented by Archer Law Office. Until next time, keep pushing forward and keep the conversation going.